Hello, potential friends and adventurers. I'm Em, and today we're going to talk about how to roleplay fun travel over a map. Welcome to the DM table. Now, when a new or even not so new DM starts to plan for a campaign that will involve lots of travel and overland exploration, covering long distances over ground or sea, they go and study local or from wherever maps, looking up geography, looking up how the terrain lies, where are the rivers, where are the coves, how is the sea line. They do all that, but whilst this is a good start, you don't need that much detail for a general campaign map for your roleplaying. Maybe you'll want to absorb some of this knowledge, but not all of that is strictly necessary on paper. However, if you wanna have a very detailed map and you have the time and you find pleasure in it, that's all gonna be fine. But we have here some extra tricks that will help you get really wonderful overland exploration beyond and above what just a detailed map will give you. After we'll learn to draw a map generally, just setting some coast and some maybe mountains, forests, whatever you may need, we want to actually think what we do need on that map. Some will even want to postpone drawing a map until we do this if they're confident in their drawing. The previous was only really done for practice. Now what we're doing is we'll be thinking, do we have some crucial dungeon or a world landmark, like some gigantic tree like Yggdrasil or something like that? Do we have something that really stands out and that we'll be using during our campaign? And how many of these things we obviously have or need? Do we have one mega dungeon? Do we have more than one dungeon? Do we have... Well, what major features do you expect your players to be visiting, that you have planned, that you know of, that will certainly stay relevant throughout and you're not unsure that they'll feature prominently? And they're not a secret. You'll want to show a map to your players soon at the start, so these are the things that they can sort of hear about or that they can see in the distance. And maybe sometimes if something is hidden, you can draw it in later. After all, the map is drawn by your hand, potentially, probably. I mean, lots of people use computers and programs for this, but I guess I draw my maps by hand, so... But even if you're using a computer, you can draw a secret location in later once it pops up, and you can have a sort of a secret key to your map that you have and a public key to your map that's written. And if you didn't know, key is the list of features that you know are numbered on the map that explain what the icons mean. So you can have a secret key for secret locations if you need it for yourself, and we don't necessarily just draw them in. We think of these features that will appear prominently in our campaign, and now we want to think, what kind of map do we want? What kind of map do we want to build around these? What kind of rivers, roads, forests, mountains, and many other things do fit in our aesthetics that we want to acquire by building this campaign map? So you want to see in your mind's eye what would be sort of accomplished by adding this or reducing that, and so on and so forth, until you achieve quite a wondrous place to travel around. And that's how we get what we want to draw. As I mentioned before, we want to actually draw this as our map. We were only practicing previously. And if our practice turned out fantastic, we can fill it in. If we want to do some alterations, we can redraw the map or draw a map from here onwards. And then we have generally the map. But now comes the fun tricks part. Though I guess previous was also quite important for a good feel of the map. But the trick is, we want to have lists, probably. Now, this is not the only way to do a map, but this is gonna be a quick way, and we'll have quite a nice and original result after this. So we make several lists. Say we make 4 lists. One list features stuff that you would like to encounter whilst traveling on that map, by pure surroundings, visuals, and so on and so forth. Features of the map that are not necessarily seen from up above where the main view of the map is situated. These will be something like formation of crystals, strange tree, maybe some patch of magical forest, maybe a temple, maybe a shrine, maybe geyser of some sort, something that maybe leads into a cave that's mysterious, maybe some sort of natural phenomena. Think Stalker series for the phenomena that I'm talking about, or think up your own, or, well, many other things. Sometimes it's a nest of a giant bird or something like that, but maybe it's abandoned or maybe it's not. But these are thus far features that can be on the map, that can be encountered. They are not visible necessarily from afar, at least not from very far, and once the players arrive, this will be the terrain that they are going to be visiting once they sort of land at this particular tidbit of the map. A second list will be encounters, combat encounters perhaps this time around, because we'll have a list for non-combat encounters as well. So combat encounters will feature all your monsters and maybe some bandits and ambushes, but also think creatively towards your setting. What does your setting provide along the lines of encounters that have reason to fight your party? Now, these don't need to be guaranteed combat encounters. They need to be sort of encounters that can end up in combat, but they don't need to guarantee the combat. You want things to naturally vary per attitude, and you want things to be able to, well, change their mind, I suppose you could say. You want both creatures and people to be able to have motivations of why they're there and what they're doing and why are they accomplishing the things that they are doing in the manner that they chose. In this case, combat perhaps, but it's also sort of optional here and there. Some things may run, some things may fight to the bitter end, but others have grand plans that are not that easily explained away until more story ensues. So you list out your combat encounters, and maybe you have more campaign ideas now because, you know, you were working on this, like I said, and lots of story popped up from it all. Now, how about the non-combat encounters, those who are unlikely but not impossible to end up in combat, and there's lots more story to be had. Much, much more. Now, we pepper as much of that as we want, and once we complete that list, we might have a couple of other lists. One of them could be interactive effects that the surroundings may sort of have at the time. Remember the phenomena I mentioned? Well, some of them might be just scenic, but you might want to have a full list of sort of what kind of effects that the area has. And then once you roll a place, you get sort of an effect that goes with it, but since it's randomized, and you'll see we're gonna be rolling for this, so it's gonna be a new combination every time. You get a sort of an effect, a situation, and such. This is also a good table for weather for those lower power campaigns. Or you can mix it all together. Wild weather, interesting encounters, all that depends on how much you want to put into this. You know, this gives it some additional flair, shall we say. Now, I did say 4 tables, but we're good probably with 3 already. 4th one can be anything you wish, or you can skip it. But what I suggest is perhaps making a quest table. A list of quests you want to happen on the map whilst traveling. Or maybe some situations that happen not due to really meeting people and not fighting them, or meeting creatures or people and fighting them, but something altogether different. It's also not an effect of the area so much so as maybe something happens during the campfire and sleep phase of the travel. Maybe something happens as a result of crossing some patch of land or border. Maybe there's sort of seasonal event happening. Maybe there's an army marching forth. Maybe there's a percentual chance of something catching up to the players, like the said army or some sort of plague, or maybe there's chance for undead to rise all over the place, but only at a certain day in a certain month or something like that. And you may have large swaths of table unfilled, resulting in a no, it doesn't happen today or now. But you can fill out, say, 10 or 20 fields out of 100 of it's something relevant like this. So those are some suggestions for the fourth table, but there can be millions of them really. And once you have all this, you roll something along the lines of 4d100 or something. Or maybe you have a dice roll simulator downloaded for free somewhere on the internet. And by the way, I can recommend that you find a good one that you like to use by the interface, and you can use the electronic one, and maybe it will even have some neat features like filling out spaces and giving you results automatically, so that as soon as you click, you get the whole thing listed out. And now what might happen is that you have sort of an original encounter and a quest aligned with it in such a manner that this will be so wonderful even for you, since even you don't know what kind of quest will happen at what kind of location with which participants. As long as you sort of write them openly enough as sort of shorthand notes for yourself, you'll be able to read deep into your notes the time they roll. You'll have inspiration to improvise on the spot what that means, and you'll be able to have a fresh new quest dependent on the location, the situation, and the participating people or creatures or whatnot. And well, that's such a wonderful method, at least I think so, and I made tables that had millions of unique results amongst themselves and had quite a bit of stretch, shall we say. I made it so that you roll, say, a full fist of dice, where you have a d6, a d4, a d10, a d8, a d12, a d100, all used at the same time. So once you roll them, you get quite a bit of a stretch of a story that happened as a result of that roll. It took me a while to write this, but I had a wonderful sort of set of testing tables for my pirate island to island test campaign that I made for purpose of testing this, and it worked wonderfully. It just kept making great campaign additions, and exploration was as wonderful as it ever has been. So I'm not saying that there wasn't lots of additional DM work that I then put in between the roles and in between the situations, because sometimes you want to sort of, put more of the thing in, even maybe 50% more. You want to maybe have quite a bit of the story on top of all this, but sometimes this will just create such great storylines that they'll become one of the main features, if not the main feature. So if you're lucky, and you probably will be with this, you'll have multiple campaign lines for your players to enjoy whenever they want. And the travel will be so fun. As for the travel itself, you might be wondering how do you facilitate it, but there's many systems for travel, and even if you want something simple, you can just sort of say I roll this set of tables once per couple of kilometers or something like that, and sort of put a scale on your map and use a ruler, and you could do that. But there's many a system for just measuring overland travel that you can look up on the internet. It's not gonna be a problem, and I think keep it simple is good advice for those that don't have something specific or particular in mind, because other than that you just want to cover the ground, and in between the specific pinpoint locations that we generate like this, you describe the forest, you describe the sea, you describe the occasional seagull or dolphin. You have people indulge in fishing or playing games, or you can do it fast. It depends on what speed you also want. You want to sort of keep pace with what players want and what the campaign needs for its pace to be adequate, and therefore it can be either fast with minimal description but still nice. You just describe a little bit of of the passing scenery, or you can go into leisure time and detail whenever you want. And you can even sort of use this to your advantage once you want some time for something, or you want to hurry up to something, and have your players also feel free to ask you to speed up or slow down. I feel that that's quite fair, and if you're prepared, it shouldn't bother you. And it's all there is to it for a simple example of how to have a great role-playing travel, and perhaps even exploration of land or sea or space, or whatever you may need, underground, any sort of traversable, explorable, long-distance travel location, or any similar thing. Also, when you're making your lists and tables, you don't want to make them too silly. I've seen lots of tables like this where some entries were just too silly, and unless it's a really silly campaign, and mind you, try to not aim from the start at that, so that you can try out how good you and the group are with just achieving good results before you try to sort of subvert into something more different than the norm. Well, depending on what the norm may be considered to be, but if you don't pay attention to the thematicness of your tables, your results, if you don't put your heart and soul into it, if you don't put enough art into it, then the results will indeed end up like many a randomly generated game. You want to keep adhering to overall themes and depth of your settings, so that the thing always feels alive, so that it feels connected with your original vision. You want to write as if it's a book that you would love to read. Therefore, don't, because it's say D100 table, get tired half the way and then, fill it out just to fill it out. Don't also put like 10 different varieties of tree or bandit. Don't be bland. Think how to raise the fantasy of the fantasy. And adventurer, if you thought this was unique, maybe you can spare a click. And I wish you good luck on your adventures. See you soon. Bye.